everyone for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transport. Uh, and in this case, we're going to talk about public transport and other modes of travel like cars, um, maybe a little bit of bikes and peds for very local travel, but also planes for long distance travel because there is a pretty common graphic that you may have seen about the high speed rail sweet spot between cars, which dominated much shorter distances, and planes, which dominated much longer distances. Um, can you type it in chat because I'm not going to check my fatty messages on stream? Um, it's kind of like how I don't check email on stream or I don't check DMs on stream, even if I'm not recording. Um, but anyway, the truth is that cars, trains, planes, and this is for intercity, and for at a shorter distance, you can think of it as bike, also ped, but bike and ped are very similar in this regard, car and public transport as modes that really kind of change the geography of the city. Oh, you can email me that too, that's fine. And of course, once you have changed the geography in the city in a certain way, it does require a lot of effort to change it in a different direction. This is why it is not easy to just install some urban rail lines and turn an auto-oriented city into a transit-oriented one, because the geography of travel there has rearranged itself to be based on the car. Now, for intercity travel, it is easier. The changes in how modes of travel affect geography, they're there, but they are, I believe, less dramatic. But the point is that questions like where you go, how often you go, for how long you go, which directions you go in, what do you do, these are questions that are very dependent on the modes of travel available. And by available, I don't mean just have been invented, but also in practical terms. For example, affordably available. There has been a change in the geography of travel. Uh, so in the geography of travel, coming from greater availability of jet travel. The jet so mass jet travel is from the 1950s, but the fares at the time were very high. So the presence of low-cost carriers, which is mostly an explosion in the 1990s, 2000s, I think early 10s, and that's when they're still growing, but not at the insane rates of the early 2000s. That also changed the geography of how people travel, and as you might expect, they are changing the geography of how lower income travelers go more than higher income travelers, because the innovations there are about saving money. So they have lower operating costs and they pass on the savings to the consumer. And in between that and the fact that maybe, especially in the United Kingdom, I know that Ryanair's marketing is something that is viewed as kind of tacky in the British middle class. Hey, positive son. So this is something that would affect how working class people travel more. So this might mean by practical availability. In the 1960s, planes had been invented, but but they were not practically available to the great majority of the populations of the United States, Western Europe, and Japan, let alone the rest of the world. So the basic picture, and I'm going to start with intercity and maybe move on to local later. I've done some videos on that on things like bikes and pets in cities, or about retrofitting different kinds of auto-oriented cities for public transit. So I've talked about sections of this. With intercity, at any rate, the starting point is the starting point is that cars have lower average speed than high-speed rail, or even like decent medium-speed intercity rail, like in Germany. And in turn, those trains have lower average speed than planes. But in each case, the access time is increased because the car is available to you where you live. If you own one, if you own a car, then oh, can I bring back the stream announcements 1.5 to 2 hours in advance? I dislike the expression "bring back" because it's something that I try to do. It's often a matter of do I know when I'm gonna do I know that I'm going to stream, or am I in front of my computer? In general, I try doing so. So yes, I try to, but sometimes I am hours away from my computer, and that makes it harder. Um, but yeah, I in general will do so when I can. Anyway, so the access time increases in the sense that if you are driving, you are almost certainly owning a car. This means that your access time to your car is basically zero, and then you drive to your destination, and uh, most likely you are uh, gonna have parking pretty close by. Um, and with trains, you need to get to and from the station, so it's longer. And with planes, you need to get to and from the airport, and then spend time at the airport at the various checks, security check, and if it's international, so passports. And that's much longer at both ends. Oh, Perry, thanks for joining. How transport influences how close people live to their work. Is it true that the more efficient transport is, the further away people live from the work? Um, yes and no. So, as I said, I'm going to start with intercity and then talk about the local level later. But um, at the local level, it's not exactly a matter of efficient, it's a matter of, I would say, sheer speed. So, what I mean is, in for example, in the history of New York, um, so New York, like a lot of the older cities, built its subway system before mass motorization was really a thing. Um, and so it went straight from a, not bike because it wasn't a thing, for a pedestrian and like some very slow streetcars, not at all like modern trams, but things that were constantly getting into traffic, often like horses interfering with them and so on. Um, so the working class had to live near city center on the lower east side and to some extent the lower west side. And then there were the steam L's, and then there was the subway, which made it much faster. And that's when people moved uh, away from the lower east side. Its population peaked in the 1900s, the decade. So as the subway was opening, and then people moved away. And now subsequently, as the system became more efficient, let's say more lines were built, yeah, um, the the population of Manhattan fell, the population of the outer boroughs rose, but I would not say it's about efficiency so much as just the availability of housing that was not severely overcrowded. Um, and uh, and often, more recently, what we find is that as transport systems keep getting more efficient, uh, often this coexists with the city growing at the expense of its own suburbs and not the reverse. Um, the reason being that maybe if it's a more efficient rail network, then yeah, it makes it easier to live, let's say, 30 minutes by train from city center. Well, maybe the trains get a little better, so instead of 40 minutes, it becomes 30 minutes, and they get more frequent. But at the same time, it also makes it easier to live 20 minutes away because now the 40 minutes became 30 and the 20 became 15, and the frequency also improved. Again, so that's also an increase. So often what happens is that people end up moving to the city at higher rates. And this is something that I don't know what's going on in New York exactly. In New York, there's a weird corona artifact, but pre-corona, the city was outgrowing its in-state suburbs. pretty dramatically, in fact. I don't know what's the situation in London. In Paris, the city barely grows, but the inner suburbs are growing faster than the outer suburbs. Um, and this is through investments in suburban transport. The issue is that the issue is that it's again not entirely a matter of distance, but also how and where people travel. Uh, and so, as I said, with cars, the issue is that they are uh, at the intercity scale. They're slow, but no, but have no notion of access or egress time or frequency. I mean, there's frequency; it's infinite. Now cars do suffer from a problem of capacity. That's at the local level. Usually, you don't have congestion on intercity motorways, or if you do, it's something very special. For example, whenever the TGV is whenever the SNCF workers are on strike, and the TGV is not running between Paris and Lyon, or they got to the point where maybe one train in three runs. That's when suddenly there's congestion appearing on the motorway. And as people try to book flights between these cities, but that's not normal. Um, the, on a stable system, on a stable system that's in this case would be auto-oriented. That's not really a thing. So, for example, in California, there's a lot of congestion on the freeways, but it's the local and regional freeways that are congested. If you're trying to drive from LA to San Francisco, you should not really hit congestion. You should not really hit traffic unless you are in. I'm sorry, unless you are in the built-up areas of LA or San Francisco, and that's when you're dealing with commuter. Uh, yeah, people are willing to put up with a commute of a certain duration, but um, I mean, you can beat the SL by car between Boston and New York. If it's not during the daytime. Yeah, people are willing to put up with a commute of a certain duration. You would expect that, uh, but the way people travel um, is still different between city and suburb. So the city, let's call it Cityway, and I live in city center, but even when I lived in Vancouver, it was the same thing. Is that you do your work trip on the train, and you do your big trips to like socialize with things that are citywide or region-wide on the train, and then your more local, let's call them trips, like retail, like going to buy food, things like that. You do them on foot, and the and of course in an auto-oriented city you do everything by car. So what this means is that this is, by the way, why commutes are pretty consistently longer on public transportation than by car. There are several reasons. One of them is that, as I said, cars are capacity constrained. Let's just do local first because you're asking, and then transition to inner city, and then maybe transition back. Um, so in a place like LA, you drive everywhere. I mean, yeah, 5% of the population of LA County and Orange County combined pre-corona took public transit to work, but seriously, it's 5%. In Berlin, the model split with the suburbs, I think 33%. Um, so you drive everywhere. So your non-work trips are longer. So your work trip must be shorter to compensate. And in contrast, on public transit, your non-work trips are shorter because in the same way that cars at intercity scale are the slowest of the three main modes, but also the one with the most flexibility and the shortest access and egress time within the city. Cars versus transit, the issue of speed and flexibility really depends on where you're going because if you're driving from, let's say you live in Berlin and you have a garage and you're driving to some touristy part of Germany, like Harz or Schwarzwald or whatever, Rostock, Saxon, Switzerland, then you're going to be able to get parking pretty easily. But when you're talking about urban trips, especially to city center, parking is going to be difficult. So, I mean, circling for parking is a pretty common complaint by drivers from outside the city when they go into the city. And if you try to do the just one more lane or just one more parking lot mentality, well, at intercity scale, you absolutely can do just one more lane because the construction costs between cities for freeways are not high, and then within the cities they go insane because it's not turning a 4-laner into a 6-laner in an undeveloped or lightly developed area. You're talking about, the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and so on lanes, and often you need a lot of complex grade separation. So maybe I should not use the expression grade separation, which is a railway term. You need overpasses, underpasses. You need ever more complex freeway interchanges. You can't just do if you want a very high capacity roadway network, you cannot just do cloverleafs because there is going to be too much conflict on the right lane. So instead, you need to do 4-lane. Not 4-lane, 4-level interchanges. So this was the original one. The idea is that you diverge here, and then you can diverge to the right, which is always the easy direction. In places drive on the right side of the road with the left. This would be mirrored if this were the United Kingdom or India. I don't think the UK even has a 4-lane interchange, or if it does, it has I think maybe it has 3 UK wide, and then there are, I think, 8 in Metro Houston. Yeah, exactly. You can do this as a natural experiment, but this is only a short-term natural experiment. It's really important because because what happens if this transit system just deteriorates, as happened in the case of Los Angeles during and immediately after World War II, then people just start driving to other destinations. And that's my point, is that you can do these for level interchanges, so it's the left turn that's hard, because you essentially need level, and it will also cross this. So 4-level interchange, very expensive to build just in terms of sheer amount of concrete, and also sheer amount of land. Cars are less land efficient than trains. So you can do one of these in downtown LA. You can't do as many as you would like if this were Texas. So the convenience versus the flexibility versus speed trade-off for cars versus transit locally is different, but like walking is the slowest, right? I mean, when you refer to a freeway as a parking lot, or when you complain that the trains are so slow, this is still stuff that's faster than a bicycle, let alone walking. But when you're walking, you can do it whenever you want. I mean, yeah, there need to be sidewalks, but even in LA, there are sidewalks. And so, with walking, the point is that public transit has your non-work trips, or your more local trips in general, be much shorter and more convenient. So people are willing to tolerate longer commutes because their non-commute trips are easier. And the second thing is that with people putting up with the commute, it's a commute where, and this is the other issue, the local issue of cars versus transit. It's not exactly a speed versus flexibility trade-off. Again, it depends on where you're going. Transit is really good at getting you to where lots of people are going at times where lots of people are going. Cars are the exact opposite because, again, they get congested. The result is that Los Angeles has a very weak central business district. The total number of jobs in here is a few 100,000, and yeah, that's a lot. But Los Angeles is a metropolitan area of 18 million people. Its closest comparison in terms of sheer size should be New York. New York is slightly larger, but only slightly at metropolitan area level. And this, the Manhattan core, that's about 2.2 million jobs. LA is like in this land area, I think it's maybe 400,000, if that. So the point is that the public transport system, in this case of New York, but it would be the same in Paris. Paris does not have so many skyscrapers, but it does have quite a lot of job density in and around city center. Is that trains are really good in terms of land. In terms of land efficiency, they just don't require a lot. So, and this is another example of how public transport or cars, each of these can create its own geography. You can't really make Paris auto-oriented. You can build freeways, so they turned the outer wall of the city into a freeway, into a motorway, into the périph'. There used to be motorways, or at least grade-separated roads. I don't know whether they qualified as motorways on the sides of the Seine, which have since been pedestrianized under Dana and Hidalgo, but these used to be through roads, and but that did not make Paris auto-oriented. It's actually really hard. So when people talk about how Paris wasn't always like this, or Amsterdam was not always like this, and you show people those before and after pictures of street redesign of do I have a source for international jobs in this little business district? Oh, I fucking wish. I do have these numbers by ward of Tokyo, but you could probably get them more easily than I can. Tokyo, within 100 square kilometers, Tokyo has more jobs than New York, fewer relative to metro area size, because Tokyo is much bigger, but it's something that we expect to be somewhat aggressive. In France, I can get it for you, I guess, at the level of the commune, or maybe the arrondissement. Beyond that, I don't know. I mean, I think that data exists in either the UK or just England and Wales, I don't remember, but at least when people have tried showing me this, the data viz that they're using is for completely different things. So if I just ask things like, how many people work within the London congestion zone, or how many people work within, I don't know, the city plus Westminster plus, I'm forgetting what else, Lambeth, Southwark, Camden, something like that. For individual stations, I have not seen jobs. I have not seen jobs for Tokyo below the ward level. If you have better data, please send it to me. But anyway, the point is that it's really hard to retrofit. So yeah, you can create cities that look like it's really stressful because there's a lot of cars on the road and pedestrians don't have a lot of space. But in these cities, driving is really exhausting. Yeah, people do that if they look down on public transit, or if it's less convenient based on where they've chosen to live, or whatever. But most people still use public transit. It's actually kind of remarkable. You have all these before and after pictures. I mean, you can just Google for some examples. Before, after, bikes in Netherlands. Yeah, before and after in Utrecht. This is literally me listening to someone's. So before and after, you guys get that this is a much more pedestrian-friendly thing than anything in like America, right? Like the before, or even here, the before, yeah, there's more space for cars, but I mean, there are sidewalks, there's a street wall, there are street trees. Like, this is not, by the standards of any actually auto-oriented place, an auto-oriented image. And again, you can see the same thing if you try to do before and after for Paris. Yeah, transit snobbery is vanishingly rare in London, yeah. True. I'm thinking maybe more historically it was more of the case, whereas now maybe it's more normalized. And also London, it's also something that is not really a thing in New York. I don't know to what extent it is a thing in Paris. Uh, like evidently there is a lot of middle class on the trains, but I mean also met enough people who are kind of suburban who don't know the trains very well at conferences and such. Uh, but yeah, so the situation is that turning such a city into an auto-oriented place is actually really hard. Um, the United States made an enormous effort to do this to its historic cities. New York never went that auto-oriented. Um, Boston, Philly, yeah, Chicago, yeah. San Francisco to an extent. Um, but what else is there? I mean, LA was not ever a large transit city. It was not a large city when trains were being built. Yeah, it was still a large city, and it was already a large, not still, it was already a large city in the 30s, but it was already a car culture center in the United States in the 1920s. Um, yeah, it exists for buses, but buses, I mean, there's a reason they keep saying that buses are the mode of public transit that people don't take. Um, and yeah, I'm aware that in London, ridership on the buses is very high. Um, and even then, um, London is a rail-oriented city. Yeah, that also has buses, but but things like the City of London or the job clusters that are not in the city but are near it, and I don't just mean Canary Wharf. I mean the entire West End. I mean things there. I don't remember where like every company is headquartered or anything like that. I just know that I think the tech firms are either at Victoria Station or somewhere around King's Cross and St Pancras. I think Google is around here or here. Um, Sorry, the people I know in the international middle class tend to be tech rather than finance, so I can know locations of sometimes, and by sometimes individual tech HQs, finance, who the hell knows. All I know about finance is line go up. Uh, yeah, so the point is, turning such a city into an auto-oriented one is hard. Robert Moses tried his best, and he was pretty good at this. Model split in Metro New York, 33% for public transit. So, pretty wrong. So, it's actually hard to retrofit. Why? Because Midtown co-evolved with the subway, and building all these extra roads, yeah, it could make it easier to drive there. Um, but it doesn't make it easy to drive there. People have been calling the Long Island Expressway, this one, IA-495, the world's longest parking lot for generations. Would one more lane fix it? No. Would 10 more lanes in each direction fix it? Yeah, they would start, but okay, go build 10 more lanes, not even 10 in each direction, that might be an exaggeration. Go build 5 more lanes in each direction here. How much do you think you can afford of that? Like, you need to level all of this, all of this. These are not poor areas. The freeways in post-war America were built at a time of disinvestment in city centers and white flight and redlining. And it was easier to build them in poorer areas like Cross Bronx than in areas that had already started to gentrify by then, like the Village with the Lower Manhattan Expressway plan. And in areas that had always been wealthy, it was not even tried. So yeah, as I said, at local level, it's not a speed convenience trade-off. It's a land intensivity question, and a point about how trains are really good if you're trying to get to a very small concentrated place, and they're also better at rush hour than not at rush hour. So trains work really well with very strong business districts, and then when you try to take such a city and make it more auto-oriented, you can't. The most you can do is very slowly creep the jobs outside for job sprawl. And yeah, as the jobs leave city center, then they're accessible by car. In fact, they're only accessible by car. So the difference is that in an auto-oriented city, you just have weaker centers. People drive to much smaller office parks, or they drive Maybe it's within the city, not quote unquote the suburbs. Maybe they drive from one corner to another, from one corner of two arterials to another corner of two arterials, for like a small office building or a small strip mall or a small business or something like that. And if it's small, I mean, I guess strip malls are also often small business. I mean, imagine like a main street style restaurant. Like that is something that, or other business. That's also something people drive to. Certainly if they own the place. And so that is kind of the difference. And in both ways, the retrofit is hard. And yeah, it has been done. It's been done not in New York because New York was too big for this, but in Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and again to an extent San Francisco. In San Francisco, the situation is also somewhat different in that it's often jobs that were never in the city, but there were industrial jobs in the East Bay that could be more efficiently sprawled. Oh yeah, fair. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. So yeah, no. The secondary cities of England certainly fit. Bear in mind, I mean, I say they fit. I mean, they have model splits in as of 2011 because I've only seen these numbers in the census, and 2021 was during lockdown still. So or social distancing if it wasn't a formal lockdown. So yeah, in 2011 these were all like 15% model split, which is like San Francisco is 17%. Like it's auto oriented, but it's not like insane. Like it's not LA. LA is more than 5%. Um, but anyway, the point is that um, it's actually hard in both directions, and the decline of public transit came. First of all, what declined was networks in smaller cities. It was usually not rapid transit. It was usually just buses that got outcompeted, um, and it was often an organic process, something that was not really done top down, or if it was top down, the top in question is not the government. It's like one corporation. Uh, In fact, there was a very concerted top-down attempt to job sprawl New York. Now, Robert Moses opposed job sprawl. This is why there's not a lot of job sprawl on Long Island, for example. But the federal government backed job sprawl. This was moralized on Cold War grounds. That it was maybe going to be harder for a Soviet second striker or something to hit New York. So that was the excuse used for encouraging General Electric to move its HQ from New York to Fairfield, Connecticut. So in New York, this was when they made the most top-down effort to decentralize job geography, and this is also where the city still, thank you very much, has the largest transit model split, and the strongest city center job concentration. So that's the real difference. And I bring all this up because if you improve public transit, then yeah, you can make people go farther away along the line, but most of what's going to happen is it's going to make it more attractive for people to live along the entire public transit line and work where the public transit line goes, which is not usually going to be their office parks. And that's where you're not really going to, if you make public transit more efficient, you're not inducing sprawl, not when cars exist. Because what distinguishes a place like Long Island from Queens is not distance from Manhattan. It's that, I mean, yeah, but it's a matter of degree, not really kind. Really, the difference is that in Queens, first of all, you're very likely to be working not in Queens. I'm forgetting the numbers. I know in Brooklyn, actually, I don't know in Brooklyn. I believe that in both places more people move from, not move, more people work in Manhattan, their home borough. And I'm going to check this, if people don't mind. And do you want to offer promotion? I want to offer the ban. just this, like the question of who subsidizes who between England and Scotland is kind of weird, just because technically the gas counts as part of Scotland. So the Scots are certain that they're subsidizing England because otherwise they would be a Norwegian style petro state, but in a progressive way. Which I guess is also how Norway thinks of itself. But anyway, let's try to do this. Draw points. We need county. I'm gonna drop the video for a moment. Like Groningen in the Netherlands. Yeah. Aw. Anyway, confirm and add advanced selection. Let's do Manhattan and then Queens. So, oh, and it didn't do counties. Confirm advanced selection. Perform pair. So, Queens to Manhattan, all jobs, 2019. I'll start using the more up-to-date numbers when I get 2022. I just don't really think 2020 and 2021 chunky as much. So this is 384,000. Now what happens if confirm it at advanced selection? I should be able to just select it from here. For some reason it's doubled. So this is Queens to Queens. This is 384 Queens to Manhattan. Queens to Queens should be about the same-ish. 309. So more people who live in Queens work in Manhattan than do in Queens. Now, if instead I do Nassau County. So let's confirm and add advanced. And let's do Manhattan, because there isn't actually that much of a travel market from the suburbs to the outer boroughs. I mean, there's some, but it's very dominated by Manhattan. So 120, I mean, we round up, so 121. And what if instead, I don't need to drop one, I can reuse. So 121, and then Nassau County to itself should be much more. 314. Yeah. So that's a big difference. So that's the difference. Like the people in the suburbs are, the people in the suburbs are on the like superficial level much less city dependent than people in the outer city or the inner city. Now, in practice, it's all bullshit, because those 315K are essentially doing work for the 121K work in Manhattan. Like, there aren't big independent industries on Long Island. Yeah, there's a little bit, but not much. So for the most part, it's just people doing the local work for people who work in Manhattan and then do retail on Long Island and then shop on Long Island, or go visit friends on Long Island. That's a big difference. Like these 315K don't really take the train ever, or don't really take public transit unless they're incredibly poor, and even then probably not. The 121K take the LIRR. They and the Suffolk to Manhattan groups, these are the people who ride the LIRR. So that's the difference at the local level. And yeah, that's how cars versus transit, that's how they create different job geographies. Again, can you retrofit? Yeah, it's been done. It's also been done in the opposite direction, by the way. Often you want to do it in an environment of high growth. So I think of Boston and Philadelphia as low growth cities because their metro area populations have about doubled since the end of World War II, maybe a little more than doubled. And that's less than some American Sunbelt cities. Like, for example, Los Angeles has grown much more than that. But doubling since the end of World War II is pretty significant growth. Like, I don't think London's doubled since the end of World War II. I don't think Ile-de-France has doubled. Like, maybe Ile-de-France. I mean, so Ile-de-France demographics. Are you actually going to tell me the total population rather than? Oh, okay, you are. Okay. So this is Ile-de-France at the end of World War II. This is Ile-de-France now. So yeah, somewhat less than a doubling. Don't forget this is Europe, so end of World War II, maybe not the best thing you want to do pre-war. So from here to here, it is growth by a factor of what, 1.8. Now, yeah, there are European cities that have grown faster, like Toulouse has grown pretty fast. Stockholm has grown pretty fast. Helsinki. This is a site that I keep using for this because they have this. This is, I guess, only at the national level, but in Sweden it also includes counties, so you can actually track the population of Stockholm County. So yeah, and so let's see, 1950 is when it finally overtakes 1 million, because here it's 900 and here it's 1.1. So end of World War II is 1 million, that's roughly when they decide to build the T-Bana, and now it is 2.4. I should probably bring back my video. So when I say London, I mean London and its commuter belt, which is a really difficult thing to measure because in the UK, the urban area is kind of, I mean, there's the block with the metropolitan green belt, and usually people don't have any, never mind that people don't really have any kind of regional governance of London and its suburbs the way that Ile-de-France exists or the way that Stockholm County exists. There just isn't a good kind of consistent geography the way there is in Ile-de-France or the way there is in Stockholm County. That's the snag. So yeah, I mean, there are faster, but anyway, the point is that there are decently fast growing European cities, but I mean, like, this is faster than Boston and Philadelphia post-war by a pretty significant margin, but I mean, doubling your population, slightly less than doubling your population since the end of World War II is still significant growth that in these American cases has been directed toward cars, toward more suburbanization of jobs, more driving suburb to suburb, and avoiding the city, who in the suburbs of Boston you might even use epithets for, like People's Republic of Cambridge. I have not heard it firsthand in the wild, but a close friend did hear it firsthand in the wild in the late 2010s. People still say that in the suburbs of Boston, and yeah, so that's so use growth as a kind of way of changing this geography. What does your dad say? People's Republic of Chicago or People's Republic of Cambridge? Because the People's Republic of the People's Republic of Cambridge or the People's Republic of Berkeley epithet usually is just a matter. But why was the question is, why is your dad thinking about Cambridge, Massachusetts in suburban Chicago? Because in the case of this friend who was working at an office park on Route 128, and thankfully no longer is, this was specifically people talking about why they don't go into the city, why they travel only within the suburban region of that region. Oh, okay, because it's family related. Okay. Right, but this is not exactly a matter of housing crisis because I'm describing a process that predates the housing crisis we're talking about. Remember, in the United States, they kept building healthy amounts of housing into the 1960s. In New York, the 1961 zoning bill changed that, but in the 50s, they were in early 60s, so early 60s when the bill had just passed, but they still, I mean, were building things that had been approved beforehand. The construction rates were pretty healthy. There were still some places to fill with missing middle density that was allowed by these zoning codes. Like in Los Angeles, the housing crisis is really an artifact of, I think, the 1990s and onward. And so it's not exactly a matter of housing crisis because even in situations where where housing construction is very liberalized, I mean, and yeah, maybe they're not letting you do the infill that you want, but there is a fair amount of housing. Yeah, no, in the UK, yes, but I'm talking about something that's not entirely. I'm talking about something that's not entirely English or British. I'm talking about. Sure, but for example, these days the UK is, I would say, the co-capital of European NIMBYism with Germany. And so it's not. So again, it depends on which era we're talking about. Again, in the United States, there was aggressive home building in the 50s and 60s, and it was entirely suburban. Or I shouldn't say it was entirely suburban, it was mostly suburban. There was a lot of housing growth even in the cities, but most of the growth was auto-oriented even in the city. So the idea is that you would drive between two different places in the city that were not city center. And yeah, sure, the city center you could build skyscrapers, kind of urban renewal, but the job geography was intended to be everywhere to everywhere, much more decentralized. What's Arlandria? What is Arlandria? Oh, do you mean Arlington and Alexandria in, yeah, Arlington and Alexandria in the DC suburbs? Sure. Yeah, there's a reason why when I talk about cities that were being turned into auto-oriented from transit-oriented, I skip DC. The reason is that DC was a much smaller metropolitan area, so this was more aggressive growth than in, for example, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, and this growth, most of it, by the way, was still channeled toward office buildings, like I shouldn't say toward office building, toward sprawl, including job sprawl. For example, this is where the US military is headquartered. This was built famously just as the US was entering World War II. And I say famously because Matt Damon literally played the general who did this in Oppenheimer. So this is no longer an obscure reference, Leslie Groves. And even says on screen that he built the Pentagon. That's why they keep promoting him. So lots of job sprawl, but yeah, also atypical for America levels of transit-oriented development. And of course, where did they do more aggressive transit-oriented development than in the United States? Please don't say everywhere. The answer is Canada. And so in Canada, they did in Vancouver and to an extent in Calgary take cities that had already become auto-oriented. This is not Toronto. In Toronto, the history is that there was single-family suburbanization in the 50s and 60s. And when they formed the TTC within the area that is today the municipality of Toronto, the city having annexed its suburbs later, and at the time it was just the metro area, the buses went to like the edge of the built-up area. And because job concentration in the city center at the time was very large, again, all of these cities came with like a background that was more transit-oriented. Because of that, Toronto remained somewhat transit-oriented. This was not an auto-oriented city that became more transit-oriented. I don't know the model splits in the 70s and 80s. I've only seen the data go back to 1996, but Toronto has been basically steady in the mid-20s throughout this period from 96 to I guess maybe early mid-20s. So the model split is about, I think, 24%. And again, maybe it's increasing by a tiny bit or decreasing by a tiny bit. We're talking changes that are maybe 1%, 1 percentage point per decade. So in Toronto, they made an effort to keep the relatively transit-oriented characteristic of the metro area. Vancouver and Calgary only started doing this in the 1970s and 80s. So in Vancouver and Calgary, in Calgary not anymore, but in the 90s and 2000s, and in Vancouver still, we're seeing large increases in the model split. So it is possible, and they've vlogged about this. And yeah, exactly. Not 99.9%, but like a lot of the growth was sprawl. Almost its projects or DC suburbs. There's stuff in New York that's higher. Um, uh, but New York is kind of identical. And yeah, so the point is that at the local level, cars in transit create their own job geographies, and I'm talking a lot about centralization, because that's what matters. It's about where you're going. And now, again, transit users have longer commutes than drivers. People talk about the Marchetti constant, about how people are only willing to commute a certain amount. There are transit commuters who go well above that. And I don't just mean in the sense that they don't really have long shopping trips because they walk. I mean, there are people who take, remember, in Tokyo, the average one-way commute is an hour. I think it's the same in Seoul. The first reason transit commuters have longer commutes is that it is not necessarily longer travel. It is just something that's going to cancel out with shorter shopping trips because it's closer to live in, because it's closer. Again, on average, I mean, someone who commutes an hour, 15 minutes from the suburbs to central Tokyo maybe also has a long trip to the shops. But for the most part, people who take public transportation to work live in denser areas. It's not like having to drive 20 minutes just to get to the hypermarket. And so that is the first reason. The second reason is also the jobs in city center are more specialized. They pay better. They are more productive. I don't think it's a coincidence that the most job concentrated city regions in the United States, which are New York, San Francisco, and Boston, are also more or less the wealthiest. The wealthiest are what? These three plus DC and Seattle. DC is less job concentrated, but still rather job concentrated. In Seattle, same. And in Seattle, it's leading to also public transit growth. These two things co-evolving. Whereas among the older transit cities in the United States, Philadelphia and Chicago and Philadelphia, they're both poorer, and Philadelphia has a lot of job sprawl. Chicago, less so, but Chicago has the loop, but there's basically no job destination within the city other than the loop, except what? Chicago, that's not a lot of jobs. Why do I think Philly is so weak among the transit cities of the United States? I don't know what the ultimate cause is at. So I can't tell. So I can tell you that things co-evolved. So much more job sprawl. And again, lower incomes. Like the city has not undergone the same levels of income growth as New York and DC or Boston. And yeah, like it is more efficient to have big, like central business districts. Like, I mean, if Japan and South Korea did not have the horrific salaryman system, they could overtake American labor productivity or American GDP per capita. Like Singapore has, I think, about the same per capita income as the United States. Longer work hours or similar work hours, but like actually U.S. equivalent incomes. And yeah, Singapore is a city state, so maybe it matters, but also, and it's something that Borners will know because we talked about this in blog comments. Tokyo and Seoul have very small income premiums over the rest of Japan and Korea. And when I say Tokyo, I mean Tokyo, Kanagawa, Chiba, and Saitama prefectures. So Tokyo itself has a rather large income uh, income premium over the rest of Japan, but Tokyo plus its suburbs have a very, very small one, and the same is true if you do Seoul plus Gyeonggi plus Incheon. So very large city premiums over the rest of the country, like metro area premiums over the rest of the country, like in Ile-de-France or in London plus commuter belt. That is the housing issue. But anyway, that's at local level, and I want to talk about intercity as well. Now at intercity, it's not two different worlds. Like there are changes in how people travel. There absolutely are, but they're not. They're not like two completely different worlds, as I said. Like I mean, you can. How much is its selection effect? Oh, you mean that high housing costs in how high housing costs in New York deter the working class? Um, sure. Bear in mind New York's large uh, per capita income premium from the rest of the United States predates this. Throughout the 1970s, Metro New York still had a large per capita income premium from the rest of the United States. And maybe we can say that the reason it failed to further converge and has somewhat diverged in the last 25 years is a housing issue. Um, but it's, I think, more complex than that. And it's, uh, but anyway, yeah, so at intercity level, um, you can actually model travel between cities and it'll make sense even in different geographies. Now, to be fair, I haven't done a lot of American modeling on this, or rather, I haven't done modeling out of American data on this. Only Japanese, to some extent Korean, to some extent Taiwanese, but the Taiwanese rail travel volumes are insanely high relative to city size, and European. Um, but the point is that at intercity scale again, people don't walk. I mean, if you're traveling on foot or by bike between places, then you're not. I wouldn't say you're traveling. You're hiking, or you're doing a bike, the bike equivalent of a hike. So the trip is not what I think of as travel. So when I think of as travel, I think of it as something that you do to get somewhere else. And yeah, the way there also to some extent matters. There is such a concept as the scenic route, but that is not the main reason you're traveling. Like if you're driving to Saxon, Switzerland, you're doing this in order to stay in Saxon, Switzerland, and yeah, maybe part of the way there. I mean, obviously not in Brandenburg, which is very flat, but once you're in Saxony, then it starts getting prettier. But the point is not necessarily to have prettiness on the way. The point is to have prettiness at the destination. And if you're doing this trip on foot or on a bike, that's the purpose of the trip, to go hiking. Yeah, people do that, but that's something very different. So with that caveat in mind, again, you have three options, which are cars, trains, planes. You can also have buses if you want to combine the worst features of both cars and trains. But these are like the three main ones. Well, cars, trains, planes are in increasing order of average speed, decreasing order of flexibility and convenience. Now, of course, you can invest in these different modes to improve them on various metrics. So, for example, there was a reduction in flexibility, a reduction in convenience of flying imposed by ID requirements, for example, in 1990s America. This, as I understand it, predates 9/11 by a little bit, and the requirement to have an ID to fly is, and to do ID checks with the ID matching the name, it's not really about security, it's about helping the airliners do price discrimination by eliminating the secondary market. Because if um, when you have too aggressive yield management, you're essentially letting people sell their own tickets, because it means that someone bought an early bird, let's say, fare, and then now sees that the market rate is very high, and therefore they can sell it on the secondary market. Um, and you can pass anti-scalping laws, but there's only so much you can do. So they are kind of forcing people who bought non-refundable tickets to be locked into these non-refundable tickets, by requiring an ID matching the name that they booked the ticket with. Uh, that's not something that's always the case when you travel. It's also not something that's necessarily really about safety or security. I don't remember people asking to see my ID when I was taking trains within Israel. And now trains within Israel are, yeah, they're called intercity, but they're like not anything anyone in Germany would ever call intercity. They would be called regional express here, or interregional in Switzerland. And yet, these are trains between two different cities. People buy tickets for them. They don't check IDs, or they don't, as far as I remember, because, I mean, Israel has its own set of security theater, but it doesn't need to do that. They make you show ID on planes, like at the airport, again, as a way of screwing the passengers with yield management. So that is something that also makes people less likely to fly, because it's another line, the ID check, often. And then the security theater got a lot worse after 9/11, and after subsequent failed terrorist attacks after 9/11, like the shoe bombing, is what made airports require passengers to take off their shoes, and that's when they started layering more and more things. It's not something that happened immediately after 9/11. It happened in maybe the 9/11 environment, the post 9/11 environment created permission structure so that every additional incident would lead to more more security there. So taking off your shoes, getting on your laptop, the liquid ban. I wouldn't call this America when the liquid restriction is worse in the United Kingdom than in the United States. I wouldn't call it more paperwork either. The security theater at airports is not It's not about state capacity. It's not like the problem with the security theater at airports is not that it's done by contractors, and so it's impossible to keep track, and and then there's misallocation or stuff like that. The problem is not that the Rapiscan machines are too expensive. The problem is that it exists. Yeah, I know it's a general point. It's just that it's not this. This is a lot of problems occur because of this. This is not one of them. So anyway, things like ID requirements or any kind of theater, it's currently happening for cross-border rail in the European Union, especially on the slower trains, because maybe the high-speed trains have more middle-class clientele that expects to be treated better. So stuff like holding the train at the border for a security theater check, let's say an ID check. But they don't ID check anyone. They don't have the resources for that. It's with racial profiling. But Sid and I were a little bit afraid of this when we were traveling to and from Copenhagen, because at the time Sid's tourist visa had expired, because it was more than 3 months after she got here. She already had been approved for a long stay, but she hadn't yet received the piece of paper. So even though she had been approved, and she had like a temporary thing that said that until that thing expires, which would have been months later, or until she got something that superseded, she could travel, we were still worried they didn't even get to our compartment, the border control people. And this is a train that sat at the border for about 10 minutes. Yeah. So anyway, the point is that such a policy will, of course, reduce the convenience of taking the maybe not I shouldn't say the convenience. It should reduce the speed of the train. It's not an additional line. The train sitting is annoying, but I would say it's still in vehicle travel time. Whereas something like making you wait in line at the train station, I would say, is a reduction in convenience. How Eurostar kindly implement Europeanization of the United Kingdom betimes. Um, no, like I mean, Eurostar is where you're saying that the in or out of the EU maybe kind of mentality in the UK is kind of terrible, where there's security theater, border checks, like a lot of what about the illegal immigrants kind of paranoia, which okay, the UK doesn't have that much of an economy for that these days, but I mean, immigrants get to Germany, that's fine. Yeah, I know, me too. Um, but the point is that, and that's what, of course, one of the things that suppresses Eurostar ridership. It's the lack of convenience. But again, it's like much more of a micro scale than a macro scale. Like at macro scale, the point is that planes change. So I'm going to talk about planes and cars, and I'm going to talk about trains kind of in the middle. So the geography of intercity travel by plane is that if you're departing, let's say, I'm going to say London, but when I say London, please interpret that as Stansted. Maybe Gatwick, maybe Luton, but I'm thinking about like a very Ryanair mentality. So if you're departing around London and you're flying, yeah, you can fly to Amsterdam, and you can fly to anywhere in Spain, and the travel time is going to be almost the same. Like this is, I mean, I know that there are trains between these nowadays. I don't actually know how competitive they are with flying, just because remember the train doesn't go direct, right? The train goes like this. Like the train would go something like this via Lille, and then Brussels, Antwerp, Rotterdam, and Amsterdam, and it's not an entirely fast section. The channel is not fast. Brussels to Antwerpen is not fast. That might actually be a 4-hour trip, which is kind of insane. Um, and yeah, so maybe not 4, but maybe 3.5. So, um, but anyway, so this is by train with a slowdown of 3.5 hours. London to Paris is 2:15 by train, and it's an entirely fast route other than the Channel. If instead of going to Paris you go to Marseille, I don't know if there are still trains that do that, but I know that sometimes there are, or there used to be, then it's about 5 hours. But if you fly, it's basically the same, because um, there's takeoff and landing distance, but in between, this is if you fly 360, this is if you fly 1 million, maybe let's do Nice, because Nice is a bigger airport, it's a little more than a million. This is a bit more, yeah, it's about, some meters. This is about 1,000 kilometers. This is about, this is 300 something. So the difference is, let's say 600 something kilometers, but it's 600 kilometers or so that you do at full cruise speed. So this is another 40 minutes. But takeoff and landing time remain the same. Taxiing time remains the same. Gate clear time remains the same. All of the extra time you need to bundle to get to, all the extra that you need to, not bundle, that you need to put, block off from your calendar, or whatever you call it, because you need to get to the airport, get from the airport to your destination, wait all the security lines, that's the same. So the point is that if you're flying, oh yeah, exactly. All the flights within Europe take 2 hours. That's exactly the point. Like from London, I'm sure that like if you're going to Gibraltar, I won't say it's slower, but maybe it's actually a little bit faster if you don't need to deal with border shit. But like London to Alicante or Palma de Mallorca, is not significantly longer than London to Amsterdam or Frankfurt or anything like that, and this is why people are vacationing there. Like, Palma de Mallorca is full of British, German, French, whatever tourists, that is an artifact of plains. Not just because it's an island, because Alicante is not, and Alicante is the same thing. Um, People fly into Alicante because at the end of the day, flying into any of these cities from Northern Europe, or the UK if you count as separate from Northern Europe, or from even from France, takes the same amount of time. And this means that if you go to Barcelona, it's because you're trying to go to Barcelona, for like very city specific attractions, which there are many of, and this is why people fly to Barcelona. But if you just want warm beaches, you go to anywhere, and it doesn't need to be a big city. And so if you go to, so maybe there's some cultural cachet to like maybe more chic places, and you don't know if Barcelona is one. I know the French Riviera is that. There is a certain amount of chic to the Riviera, and I don't just mean Monaco. I mean like Saint-Tropez, and or of course Nice. So the point is that planes let you decentralize your vacation geography because they can go wherever. I mean, you need to build the airport, but the planes can go between the two airports, and the travel time difference is not significant. Um, and again, this is where you're getting Alicante, which is not a large city, or Valencia. Valencia is larger, but it's not. But it's still much smaller than Barcelona. Yeah, exactly. And this is why I highlight a lot of things about Ryanair, and I said at the beginning that it's going to be classed. It's something that's not the middle class, or I mean, it's either working class or it's working class people in Essex who really don't wish to be called poor, but and like vote Tory to convince themselves that they're not poor, but they're not professors, they're not lawyers or anything like that. They're not doctors, and the and it's something that's not just Spanish, by the way. I guess in Spain there's also the political element, because as I understand it, this is something that is not just a Ryanair artifact. The concept of British people vacationing in Spain, as I understand it, was enough of a thing in the 60s that there were people that there were dissidents who were trying to use their connections to the British left to try to encourage people in the United Kingdom not to spend their vacation pounds in a fascist Francoist regime. So this is something that predates the best day in Franco's life. It was 1975, right? The best day in Franco's life? Yeah. Best thing he ever did. So yeah, Greece, also Turkey. In Turkey, it's kind of the same thing. There are quite a lot of places that are popular as just flight destinations for maybe Northern Europeans, Eastern Europeans. I don't know to what extent it's a thing from the United Kingdom to fly to Turkey, because it does get longer. Like the two largest, at least kind of free cities in Europe are this far apart. Moskva, not even kind of free, but Israeli, same thing. In Israel, the equivalent would be Cyprus or parts of Turkey. I think Antalya is rather common among Israelis. And yeah, they're just resorts that are for working class people in Germany or Russia or Poland who are not, who in the 2010s, 20s are not actually poor, so they could afford to fly. And that's a very common thing with flight geography. It compresses travel distances to the point that the metric of travel is kind of sort of discrete. What I mean by the discrete metric, Turkey is popular for medical tourism. I have no idea. Yep. Spain is still good. Yeah, it's really hard to tell what you mean by the islands are richer than Thessaloniki, because I don't know the income levels there very well. Yeah, so Why do Israelis need to go abroad for Mediterranean beach holidays? Um, because they want to be on vacation, and if you want to be on vacation, like, where exactly are you going to be on? Like, yes, you can drive to. Yes, I'm sure you can drive to the beach, but first of all, it's an Israeli beach. Um, Second, like, it's not as special as if a tourist place, unless maybe you're going to Eilat. Um, I mean, the point is not just people going to different climate from what they have. I mean, people from Southern California still go on vacation, and sometimes like going on vacation to warm places. People in Florida, same thing. Um, like I don't think it's just people from cold places in the United States who travel to Cancun, for example. Uh, and so there absolutely is. So it absolutely is a thing that people travel even within the same biome. Uh, so the point is that this is something that only really works in an almost discrete kind of metric. And for people who don't know the math of discrete metric, the discrete metric is when you say that the distance between 2 points in your space is 0 if it's the same point, which is trivial, and between any two other points the distance is 1. That's called the discrete metric because the way that it looks is like a bunch of separated out points and like however many dimensions you need to depict all of that. Whereas obviously if you walk it's not discrete. If you walk it's the simplest kind of metric. The distance is just the Euclidean distance. And if you drive, it kind of is the same at this scale because it matters where the roads go, but intercity roads are not actually expensive to build. Motorways, they get more expensive. Bridges, they get more expensive. But the really high expenditures on roads, they don't come from setting up some kind of four-laners or you can go more than 100 kilometers an hour between pairs of cities. The really high costs are within the cities. And yeah, if you're trying to build the roads to a higher standard than, let's say, 100-ish kilometers an hour with much lower speeds through the mountains, yeah, then you need to start doing much more complex engineering through the mountains, maybe even tunnels. But the basic system is not where the costs are. So with cars, the geography is kind of just a matter of proximity. And then in between there's the rail geography. Okay, I have not been to Lesbos. Isn't like Lesbos like an incredibly conservative place because it's like really far out and like I think they had a thing where where some migrant boats landed there and then they were being racist to the migrant boats in Lesbos. But anyway, so also about the PPP arbitrage, Israelis who go on vacation usually go on vacation to places that are wealthier than Israel. Like it's not a PPP arbitrage. It used to be that Turkey was a very popular place to go to in Israel. I don't think it is anymore. Like the relationship between Israel and Turkey has deteriorated a lot in the last 15-ish years. Like I think a lot of it's just fallout from the Mati Marmara, and then Israel not taking serious efforts to repair the relationship, and to be fair, Turkey not being terribly interested in doing so. But anyway, so yeah. With trains don't have the kind of discrete metric. It's not like, oh, everywhere it's 2 hours from London. Trains, the absolute distance matters. Within a system, it's almost linear. This is why in Tokyo, I mean, the distance between Tokyo and Fukuoka is about twice as large as the distance between Tokyo and Osaka. Right? It's by air 900 versus 400, so a little more than twice. And then the train travel time is also about twice. I think actually it's maybe a little bit less than twice this because the trains are slower. Like they bend a little around the mountain and They were built earlier, so lower top speed. But basically, 2x becomes 2x. And then flying, it's the same. It just doesn't matter. So that's one of the reasons why this is a 90% plane, 10% train market, and this is something like 80% train, 20% plane. Now, in Europe, there's also the added asterisk that cross-border trains suck. So this is 900, so about the same in a straight line as Tokyo to Fukuoka. Flying within Europe is much less convenient than within Japan. In theory, a train could do that in 4.5 hours. That's usually a 50-50 market in Europe. In practice, it's about 7.5 hours or 8 hours. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking of, yeah. I don't want to say lesbians suck, I want to say the people of Lesbos suck, if that makes sense. I thought they were also really pissed at the term lesbian, that like they didn't really like that their fair, in their view, island is associated with WLW. Okay, let's try to pick a random date and hope that this is not a Deutsche Bahn does maintenance and so the trains run at a quarter speed day, because that is sometimes what they do during peak intercity travel season. Okay, so what are we seeing here? And I asked the people not to look at the prices because, well, okay, I'm seeing 809 might be the fastest. 821. Wait, what? Oh, Spette. Yeah, so a bit more than 8 hours at fastest. Yeah, again, it should be 4.5. So if that were built, then it would change it would change somewhat the travel geography, because it would make such trips easier to do. But the point is, if you're trying to think, how am I going on vacation to the exact same places where I'm driving or flying by train, you kind of don't. In the same way that if you're thinking, how am I going on vacation to the places that I fly to by car, the answer is you don't. Like, you don't, I mean, yeah, maybe you can road trip from Germany to Italy or to Spain. People absolutely do that, but that takes longer. And that's not normally how people travel between Northern Europe and Southern Europe. It's not normal to do these road trips and then maybe you bundle driving through the Alps for a couple of days, seeing the Alps, seeing some nice alpine towns, then Milan, then like the Riviera or something like that, and then Spain. Like, you can do that. Like, it's absolutely possible. It's just not very common because the driving distance is so long and you need to be interested in everything along the way. Whereas you could just fly to Valencia, you can fly to Alicante, you could fly to Palma de Mallorca. And so these are going, I mean, you're flying farther, you can fly to Lisbon, you can fly to Porto. Not Porto. The first O is not an O. And so you can do, again, you can fly. Sorry, you can't drive, it's just inconvenient. It's like saying, oh, I just like driving a lot, doing national parks trips in the United States. Can you fly there? Yeah, you can. Some people do. It's just, I mean, from New York, I imagine you're flying, but if you're going, but like Midwesterners have this culture of driving, 10 hours between cities. Can they fly? Yes, they could, but it would not be convenient. It would take less time. But the car would not be available at the destination, and in the Midwest, unless you're going to Chicago, it's really important. You're going to need to deal with airline pricing that may not be very favorable for things like Indianapolis to Detroit, or Detroit to St. Louis or something like that. Because maybe if it's Detroit is a fortress hub, there isn't a lot of competition. They're trying to keep the planes clear for connecting passengers, people doing Indianapolis to Detroit to wherever. So you could fly, it's just not going to be very convenient. So there's the culture of people driving from Detroit to St. Louis. They're doing these like 9-hour drives on the interstates. Uh, and so this is something that matters to how people travel between cities. Euromaglev, um, libertarianism is real, and I live in a country with a minister of finance and a minister of transport subscribing to these ideologies. Uh, Hulu pointed out to me in Twitter DMs, maybe this month, that if you look at Germany's debt to GDP ratio over the last 25 years, and you were so from maybe 2000 or so, let's say, to the present 2024, and maybe look at projections for 2 or 3 years in the future, and you were to ask, can you point out on this chart when Germany got kind of involved in the biggest recent war in the biggest war in post-Cold War Europe, you would not be able to point this out. Like, they're not borrowing in significant quantities to deal with the Ukraine war, for example. So yes, this is real. I live it, sadly. So no, it's not Euromaglev. With Euromaglev, I mean, you need maglev, which is its own problems. But the point is that with like normal French style, like French speed or Spanish speed, high speed trains, this would be 4 hours. With taking some kind of account of the fact that like there are some slowdowns in Germany that are geographic rather than managerial, this should be, you can do Paris to Frankfurt in about 2.5 hours. Frankfurt to Berlin should just be 2. Going via Halle. Halle and Erfurt. The idea is to go like this, and then they're already starting to design a line to go across the mountains. It's not quite to, but almost to Frankfurt and to Hanau. It's going via Fulda, I believe. Yeah. The idea is to go something like this. And if the trains were not horrifically padded on the timetable, then this would take 2 hours. Berlin to Frankfurt. And then again, Frankfurt to Paris. It's just, this is a really slow section. It's fast in France. So this should be 2.5 hours. So the point is that if the trains were better, you would not be taking them. Like, the trains are not ever going to substitute for planes if you're going to go Northern Europe to Spain. Again, Greece, Turkey, things like that. Now, they could take you to other places, is the difference. So, do I need to do a maglev video? I will do a maglev video if maglev gets, if it's packed. Like, I'm not going to do a maglev video that's just me randomly picking a topic. But if there's a serious peg, I will do it. Like, if people are proposing it, or if way too many people on social media are talking about it, like, I honestly could see, I mean, not now, but if it had happened now or not, whenever it originally was published, which was like 10 years ago, the map, you know, the one by Alfred Wu, I could talk about the map. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could talk about the map without a peg if I'm talking about high-speed rail. But it's something like that I would vlog about. Maglev is real. Maglev is absolutely real. They're very slowly building it Tokyo to Osaka. But anyway, so the point is that, for example, in a world in which you can't really drive or can't really fly, so flight chain, like Flugskam, didn't reduce international flying. It reduced domestic flying in Germany and Sweden. These are the 2 main countries of the Fridays for Future of the Fridays for Future movement of 2019. It is currently 2 completely separate movements because the German Fridays for Future community no longer wants to associate with Greta Thunberg. And so the point is that in a world in which on the one hand the trains get better, and on the other hand cars and planes get harder to use, or people just use them less, you're not going to take the train to the same places that you drive to, or to the same places that you fly to. So this means much less Alicante. But Barcelona I can see, because Paris to Barcelona is like 4.5 hours, if they finally complete the low-speed gap. Like so it's high speed across the border to Perpignan, and then Perpignan to Montpellier uh, is currently in design. It's supposed to open in, I'm forgetting when, maybe 2030, maybe 2034. It keeps getting pushed back, but I think they're saying 2030. It got a declaration of public utility, I think last year. So essentially they're saying it's going to happen, but France builds very slowly. So I believe it's 3 hours to Montpellier, or 3 hours and a bit to Montpellier, and then actually it might be 4, not 4.5, because like, yeah, no, 4, no, that's not 4, that's probably 4.5. Yeah, that's something that I can absolutely see people do. Paris to Barcelona. Um, Now Barcelona to Madrid is 2.5, so this is 7. So they're building Bordeaux to Toulouse, and then they're also building uh, a branch from Bordeaux south, but it's not going to go exactly across the border. I think it's going all the way to Dax. So they're going to build, and it's not going to go direct. Like it's, I think, like this or something like that. So if they actually complete it across the border, like the real Crayones to Pamplona, but that's another mountain tunnel. The less crayony part is just to the Basque Country and then through the Basque to Madrid. I think that's 5.5 maybe from Paris. Which is, I mean, again, in a world in which you can't really fly, people would take it by train. But it's not going to be from Germany, it's going to be from Paris. Because from Germany, if you're willing to sit 5 hours on a train, you're just going to Italy. You're going to northern Italy. You're going to Milano, maybe from southern Germany you can hit Rome in there, and of course, like, Rome is its own thing. Wait, which phrases did Germany burn in the middle of the... Like, I'm mostly thinking of usually when I'm thinking about things that Germany burned in the middle of the 20th century, I'm thinking of people and not phrases. Yeah, but anyway, so we're talking much more urban tourism because the whole point, so driving is almost a Euclidean metric, almost. Taking a train, so if I'm analogizing that metric, and flying is a little bit like the discrete metric, then taking a train is a little bit like traveling along a graph network. You can't go anywhere. Sorry, you can't go everywhere. You can go to the main nodes and a few places in between them. So you can go Berlin to Hamburg. You can go to places that are close enough that you can change to a regional train from there, like Rostock, Lübeck, things like that. But it's a fundamentally, so part of it is that trains are much more useful for urban tourism. So imagine tourism that's much more urban focused, and yeah, if you want beach tourism, the Riviera exists, but the Riviera is very crowded. So it means that like it's much more of a sense of place and much less of a commodity where Alicante can just compete on price, because how the fuck are you getting into Alicante? It's far. Maybe they can build a high-speed line from Barcelona to Valencia to Alicante. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're building Barcelona to Valencia. I don't think they're building it as far south as Alicante. But it's still inconvenient, and this line is never going to be especially frequent because Barcelona is on Madrid. And so so if you're dealing with that inconvenience, you're probably just gonna go to like the main cities, and yeah, these cities can have nice beaches. I mean, like, I don't know Barcelona, I've never been, but I can tell you what the beaches are like in the Riviera. They're nice. Everyone else thinks so as well. This is why they're so crowded. And again, more tourism in maybe historic sites that happen to be near, that happen to be large enough cities or near large enough cities that you can do this. So, Rome, thank you very much. Not so much Athena, just because Athena is kind of far. Just not a lot of people live here, and also the trains are kind of suck. And yeah, they could invest in the trains here, but look at the geography. Like, the Balkans really do have geographical problems. Besides problems like everyone wants to commit genocide against everyone else, which is also a problem in like, this part of the world. Um, and the uh, but at least here the population density is high. Here it kind of is. Um, and yeah, it means uh, so again, if it's like picturesque tourism, again, you can still do some beaches or cities that are considered very stark and pretty, like Venezia or something. Alpine tourism is going to get a lot harder because the trains can't cross the mountains. You can maybe change to something, but it is less convenient. So I think ski tourism is going to be very different if it's by train. Um, Whereas by car, you just drive, it's fine, or you fly and it's fine. So that is a real difference between how people travel intercity by mode. Uh, I mean, trains obviously can't get you between continents. Uh, I mean, yeah, people talk about doing a tunnel between Spain and Morocco, but that's still Spain and Morocco. That's not ever going to be how you get between, I don't know, France and Algeria or something. Um, Let alone, you know, Germany and Ethiopia. Um, Britain and Egypt. Uh, so that is a real difference now in travel. Like, insularity matters, and I don't mean insularity in the social sense. I mean the sense of being an island. Like Palma de Mallorca, just is not reachable by train. Um, Coles, same thing. I think there are ferries out of here, but so that is a real difference, and it's different. I wouldn't call it a retrofit because most of the purpose of a city is not tourism, uh, and so it's not the same as office parks that just would not have existed if there had not been a concerted effort to make regions more car oriented, and then because city center could not possibly adapt to the level of automobility required to reach such a small uh, job concentrated location, then the jobs started moving to suburban office parks. Um, and then in places that maybe worked on becoming better at public transit rather than better at cars, these office parks just don't really exist. It's not like so it's not going to be things that just don't exist. Um, like the Riviera is still going to be around. Thank you very much. I think the nature of tourism is different by different modes. Um, Again, it's a much smaller difference than the this is a central business district that literally 80% of it would not exist if the subway did not exist. Um, why not? Yeah, I mean, you could do trains to ski. It's just, um, I don't think it's as significant. Like, my recollection is that what seated Corona in Germany at the very beginning, it was two things. One was Carnival in Köln, but there was also this ski resort in Austria where it was people flying back after the outbreak there, and so you could kind of trace where people were skiing a lot in because these were the big uh, corona hotspots in this part of the world, and it was mostly southern Germany actually. Just more of a skiing culture than northern Germany or something like that. Yeah, you can do mountains by train tourism. It's just um, when you're thinking about like the high ridership on JR East, you're not really thinking about ski tourism. You're thinking about other things. Yeah, it's melting fast, but okay, climate change on current. I'm trying to remember whether it's current policy or current pledges. I want to say that on current policy, climate change is said to be plus 2.7, maybe plus 2.5 degrees, and on current pledges, it's I think 2.1. So wherever you have a summer temperature that is lower than minus 2.5, you're still going to have permanent snow. Like 2.5, like um, I believe the dependence of the dependence of temperature on altitude is what it is. Is it 1 degree per 60 meters? Like 1 degree Celsius per 60 meters? Because then it means that 2.5 means that the snow line moves up 150 meters. which yeah means less snow, but it's not going to mean no snow. Um, um, yeah, I mean there's less. I mean there's less snow in areas that are cold but temperate. Let's put it this way. So I don't actually remember where you live, but so like in Germany, for example, yeah, climate change means less snow. I highlight this because there are places where global warming means more snow. These are places that are much colder. So not places where winter is around freezing. So climate change means that there are just going to be so many fewer days where the temperature is below freezing that you're getting less snow, but rather places where any winter precipitation you get is still snow. Like Siberia plus 2 degrees is still extremely cold. And so in places like that, sometimes they get more snow in winter because global warming, for other reasons, maybe makes their winters wetter. Um, and again, wetness in this case would be snow, not rain, because it's much colder than freezing. And I've seen some denialists say, "Hey, you said global warming. Why is there more snow in East Antarctica or something like that?" Um, oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, yeah. In this part of Northern Europe, yeah, then definitely snow means just colder winters. So global warming means less snow. But again, that's not the case everywhere. Like in places that are not Austria or the Netherlands, but are again most of Russia, for example, it's very different. It's in fact significantly different than there's in Antarctica. So in East Antarctica, there's I think more snow because global warming means that the air is a little wetter, so more snow falls. So as I understand it, East Antarctica is actually gaining glacier mass, although not by enough to offset the loss in West Antarctica, which is less cold. So there's more snow melt. Yeah, maybe I don't know. So I don't ski enough to even be able to say, oh yeah, just shift them 100 meters because I genuinely don't know whether what I'm saying is, oh yeah, that's very simple. Just grow two more hands if it's difficult to lift things. Um, Versus, oh yeah, that's just a very simple life hack. I genuinely don't know. Um, um, yeah. So the other issue is that it depends on again where you're going. Just because the graphiness of terrains means it's much easier to do urban tourism. Uh, much easier to do urban tourism, which is a lot of tourism. Uh, if there are historic sites, it's much easier to do them if they are in big cities. Which is again, it depends on where. So I imagine that there are castles that are easier to get to from cities and ones that are harder. So the ones that are harder are going to be more auto destinations. The ones that are easier are going to be more train destinations. So that's going to matter. In Israel, for example, castle sites are all way outside the cities. Um, like you go to Masada, you go to random Crusader castle shit, and so these are not urban. These are not where the cities are because the I mean like historic forts. Not just, maybe I shouldn't say castle because that evokes medievalism. So not just Crusader sites, but also sites from antiquity. These would uh, not really be where Israelis live because because Israel is mostly a coastal plain country, just because that's where the uh, best farmland is for modern farm practices. So the kibbutzes were mostly there. It's like, I mean, Israel's pretty consistently the valley country, and then Palestine, other than Gaza, is kind of the mountain country. And of course, Jerusalem's like in the mountains, but ideologically significant. Um, but so like a lot of the historic sites would be either in Palestine or not even in either country in the southwest of that. Like the biggest Crusader castles were in like the biggest Crusader castle sites you can visit, or that you would used to be able to visit are in Syria, maybe? I think Krak de Chevalier. Isn't Krak de Chevalier in Syria? How do you spell Krak de Chevalier? I'm going to spell this and then. Oh! This. Okay, this. Okay, I thought it was the French spelling. Okay. Yeah, this is in Syria. Um, so yeah, so the point is that in Israel, like, there's no real reason for a historic site to be in the city. Of course, in Jerusalem, sure, um, but that's not where most Israelis live. Most Israelis live here, 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 maybe around here, um, here. Um, so that's not very urban. So it's like much more of a drive culture or hike culture. Uh, and then in Europe, again, I mean, there are more urban castles, there are less urban ones. Just again, it's pretty random. And by pretty random, I mean, well, some of them turned out to anchor significant enough polities that these became significant cities, and some didn't, and just became random castles. Are there questions before we lose the light? You kind of see how it's getting dark outside. Oh yeah, because I guess Kyoto especially was very ideologically important, but also there was the one in Osaka, right? Um, and I guess for classical stuff in Europe, it really just is a matter of. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the polities. So okay, so these polities actually did become like significant prefectures. Wasn't Fukuoka like a really significant castle? Like my recollection is that there was Fukuoka and Hakata, and I thought Fukuoka was the samurai castle city, and then Hakata was the commercial one. But maybe I'm uh, getting it the other way around. Just to remember that when they merged, the name Fukuoka got the name, Hakata got the train station name. Um, yeah, okay, so I got it right. Yeah, Fukuoka was the castle town. Yeah, yeah, it's not just Osaka. Um, with like the Osaka castle. Um, yeah, and so in yeah, for classical things in Europe, it's really just a matter of how accessible they are, because often these are just going to still be big cities, by which I mean things like Rome, um, lots of historic sites, uh, really difficult to get to within the city because the geography of Rome shifted so much that it had uh, different centers. The example that I learned from Ada Palmer is that as the city shrank during the collapse of the Western Empire, its most significant center was not its historic center, like the Palatine Hill, or like the Palatine Hill or something, because the Palatine Hill had over the first 2 centuries of, not over the first, over the entire Principate, turned into kind of like the complex of the emperor, and the emperor just became less significant to Rome after the third century crisis. So the centers shifted elsewhere, and then in the early Middle Ages, the most significant center was the Vatican. So the historic sites are, I mean, partly the Vatican, but then also the classical sites, and then things in the middle that became more of the modern city. Um, so within Rome, if you're trying to do tourism, it's really annoying to do so, just because it's climbing a lot of hills, and uh, the geography of the city never makes it really easy to take trains to all the time. Uh, but I mean, Rome is still a big enough city that you have trains there from a bunch of places. Athena again is the hard one, just because the geography of the Balkans is such bullshit. Istanbul's really, I mean, Istanbul's full of historic sites. It's just that getting there from the rest of Europe is even harder because of location. Of course, if you're Turkish, it's not that hard to get to. I mean, like the inner city trains in Turkey are not great, but they're not terrible and they're improving. Like they're building up their high-speed rail network. Um, and I mean, Turkey is big enough that domestic tourism is significant. Okay, okay. No, I mean, of course they do, but how are Niigata and Sapporo not ex-castle towns? Like, like what made them so special? Because I mean, I know that like Osaka was a commercial city in the Edo period, but Osaka had a castle. It's just that the person in charge of the castle lost to the Tokugawa clan. Wait, what? Oh, right, because Hokkaido only became Japanese after the Meiji Restoration, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, Niigata was just a merchant. Was just a merchant town that never had it. Okay. Anyway, are there questions about this and how different modes of transportation change urban geography? Do I think factories can be integrated with transit? Depends. Um, I mean, you need site work, and often they don't care. Um, but I mean, you can do shuttles. I mean, the Tesla factory, um, this one, um, I think you can. I think you can train to Buster. I don't think they have direct trains. Like the S, but you can take the S-Bahn and then, uh, like I guess to Ekne. Then there are shuttles. Um, the Vesper, I don't think there are direct passenger trains, but I could be wrong. Like my understanding is that the commute there is S3 to a bus. Yeah, that makes sense. Are there other questions? And if not, we can break. You can already see the light fading. It's still late May, not late June. Alright, if not, then thank you all for watching, despite the, and I'm sorry, uh, and I'm sorry, uh, where is it, where, I mean, where's the request? Oh, with Positive Sun. Yeah, and I'm sorry, Positive Sun, about the lack of warning. Again, I knew I was gonna stream, I didn't know what about. So, thank you all for watching. And thanks for sticking with me, especially as I had to change the order of of the stream. So thank you all, and I will see you again either on Saturday or Tuesday in a week. We'll see. Anyway, thank you, and ta-da.